In the words of Randy Quaid, I'm back. Well, we're back. After hiatus, we're ready to share more opinions, special guests, recaps of Lauren's dates, kidding Lauren, and a season of hashtag crazy bids that you'll never, ever forget, or maybe want to forget. We'll all see before the season comes to an end. Hello, everyone. We hope you've all had a safe, healthy, and big league productive the past few months. I'm Bill Culhane, along with Tony Callis. Tony's jumped on for his second season of the good ship TBBT. If your and your family's health is somewhere near the top of what you think about, you'll want to listen in to our maiden interview for the 17th season. We visit with Dr. Rodney Rohde, who lets us know some of the latest on U.S. health. And did I mention Crazy Bids is going to be the talk of the town in 2017? Tony, my good friend, nice tan. You've got a gleam in your eye. What have you done during our break from informing and entertaining humanity?
Well, I've just been doing my own thing and making sure to stay on top of BidPrime and be number one sales development here at the company.
And what was this thing about, what was it, I guess it's been 6 weeks ago or so, where you had that trouble wearing leggings under your airplane you were flying, went to Tulsa?
Can you believe that? They wouldn't let me on the flight. It's freaking ridiculous. I can't believe they're not going to get my business ever again, I'll tell you that much. And the BidPrime business card is not going to have access for that airline.
This season of Crazy Bids, Tony, I know you're excited. I can see you're excited.
I'm very excited.
Now, during our first 2 seasons of the show, we've been blessed to acquire new friends along the way. Our guest in this episode, Dr. Rodney Rohde, a passionate guy, has become our resident expert on all things U.S. health related. As a friendly reminder, just to tell you a little bit about Dr. Rohde, he's the Associate Dean for Research, College of Health Professions, and Chair and Professor in Clinical Laboratory Science at Texas State University, just down the road from our palatial studios. And he joins us now on the TBBT hotline.
Now we're happy to be joined by Dr. Rohde. And Dr. Rohde, no pressure at all, but you're the first guest on season 3. Do you feel any pressure?
Not a bit. I mean, the only thing that can happen is it'll all go downhill from here, right? So we'll see what we get.
Exactly. That's very well said. Now, 6 months ago, and many of our listeners recall, it was September of last year, you visited with us, and among the variety of things we talked about, we covered Zika, MRSA, and a few other health topics. So let's fast forward to today right now. For many of the thousands of our listeners, we have listeners around the globe, but most of our listeners are in the good old U.S. of A. Can you give us a couple of health concerns that right now you and your peers are keeping a close eye on?
Absolutely. And it's always great to be on the show, Bill, so thanks for having me back.
Sure.
Probably the 2 biggest, and of course these are a little bit in my own view, but 2 of the biggest that I've been following and I encourage my colleagues and just the general public to be aware of, and you're aware of this too now, is the whole problem around antibiotic resistance and healthcare and community-associated infections. So they're really tied together, but they're kind of 2 separate entities. And really this is finally getting some global and national attention. It's always been there, but it seems to be gaining some ground with respect to understanding. And then going along with that, I don't know if this is a 2A or a number 3, even though we were just mentioning a couple here, but this has become kind of a passion of mine, and I think a lot of people are starting to pay attention to this, and that's just kind of a concern for health literacy. And that's not a disease, Bill, but I think it's a weakness in our country and really around the globe. In other words, do people really spend enough time understanding what diseases are out there, what is important about their own health, all the way from just understanding the root cause to kind of communicating the correct information? So that's become an effort of mine and many of my colleagues to try to do a better job with that.
And that's something that we, through our podcast, obviously, we're trying to help the dissemination of information as well. So I guess that's my long-winded way of saying I agree with you. We just recently put out a report on government purchases of medical/healthcare related services, equipment, et cetera. So there are some governments out there who
Absolutely.
are putting a dent on things. Of course, ACA has been all over the news for some time, and that's a conversation for another day, probably for another podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
Can you kind of give us an overview on the dialogue regarding health funding at the local and or national level? What are you hearing from your peers? Is there too little, too much, misdirected?
I really appreciate that opportunity, and I will try to avoid the whole ACA area,
Okay.
although certainly it's tied in there,
Sure.
when you look at the big picture. But if you just look at public health, which is my kind of background from way before academia, and this is, Bill, this isn't even political to me. This is over multiple presidencies and over multiple decades. Public health and just kind of the health of America is definitely a key thing that I think we all need to be looking at. And if you go back about a decade, we'll just keep it in the last decade or so, budgets for public health through CDC and other entities have really been flat. There's been a little bit of up and down between like 05 and 12, but overall it's dropped to the point now where if you look at kind of an average cost per person, it's around $20 a person if you look across the United States, going back to 2012. And so that concerns me. And it's not just the infusion of money, which is important. You certainly want that to be done correctly and the most efficiently. But for me, as an educator now in medical laboratory and public health settings, just the shortages around education funding, scholarships, awareness to get people understanding that we're losing a large number of professionals to retirement. And so there's these huge gaps that are starting to happen. If you look back since about 2008, we've lost about 46,000 jobs in this sector, and they're really not being replaced. So as you know, and this happens in a lot of sectors, we're doing more with less. What worries me most is that we have amazing people that can do that in many instances, but at some point there's a breaking point, and you start getting brand new employees and healthcare professionals that may not have that veteran. And who doesn't want a veteran sitting around to ask those questions that, they've seen over 30 or 40 years of their lifespan? So that's just a little bit of the problem, and I can go a little bit more into detail if you'd like. I mean, I've got data and numbers in my brain, but I didn't know how much detail you wanted to get into.
Let me ask you this. What are a couple of numbers that get the attention of people immediately? Yeah.
Okay. Well, can I talk about Texas just a little bit?
Please.
Okay. So in Texas, since I'm housed in Texas, and of course you could look this up for yourself in different states, but in Texas, we're number 40 out of 50 states for public health funding. And so, and when you look at the overall picture of that, that's about $56 a person. And you can go from a high, it's based on about a $200 range. So Hawaii and Alaska are the best. They have about $200 per person as far as this is funding. And then it goes to a low in Nevada of, it's like, I want to say it's around $30, something like that.
And that's Nevada. Over a year.
So that's over a year. So this was in 2000. It's only up through 2016. So we obviously don't have 2017 data yet, but that's coming out of it. And this is this data comes out of the Robert Wood Johnson report. They do an annual report for all types of measurements. It's a wonderful site if you ever would like to look that up. They do a constant kind of preview and overview of this particular types of things through something called the Trust for America's Health, TFAH. And so it's something I keep my eye on. I've been looking at it for years. And so it just gives you an indication of everything from, diabetes to cancer deaths to premature deaths to infectious disease. And it does it through just straight statistics and facts. And so it's a nice way to look back over time and kind of try to get a feel for positive and negative outcomes.
Because I know you have a crystal ball sitting there on your desk there in San Marcos, he's been in office for a couple of months now. Look into your crystal ball. What does a Trump presidency mean for the U.S. health industry?
Wow, that's a great question. When I do try to look at this in a totally logical kind of science way. And so let me kind of place it this way, because this is a statement I've been using in the last, really since the president's changed. Because to me, it's, I'm looking at this as a public health investment, so it's a little different than worrying about who's in office. So even before Trump and whoever's next, one of the things I continually tell people is that an investment in public health, which really includes the medical lab profession, I think it's at least as important as the defense budget. And in fact, I think it might be more important. And the reason I say that, Bill, is because most Americans stand a much greater chance of having an encounter with measles, influenza, cancer, a premature birth, their elderly parents going into the hospital and picking up an acquired infection when they didn't realize it. And you've even seen in the last few years, Zika and Ebola that entered U.S. So I think there's a much greater chance. In fact, I know there's a much greater chance of those things happening than, say, terrorism. Not that that's not important, but I just believe most Americans are going to walk across this public health issue quicker than they realize.
Those are all great points. It'll be interesting because, again, our audience is literally across the country and from every walk of life, every industry. It'll be interesting to see what kind of opinions we get on that. Dr. Rohde, obviously we follow you, and I know a number of our listeners follow you as well. In your opinion, who are three must-follows on U.S. health, whether it be Twitter, RSS feeds, whatever the case may be? And those few people you mentioned, what do they bring to the information table?
First of all, I'd like to, preface that with, I hope everyone follows and listens and reads from many entities and people, because that's very important as you gather information. But three people that I follow pretty regularly and kind of take note of their posts or blogs when they're putting things together. One of my first that I've been following pretty regularly is Dr. Peter Hotez. He's the dean of the National School of Tropical Medicine at Baylor here in Texas Children's area, and he's got numerous types of awards and honors, and he's been around a long time, and he ties into my public health love. So what's interesting about Dr. Hotez is that he's the father of an autistic child, and yet he is a pro-vaccine, pro-public health, pro-everything that I personally believe is critical to our nation's health. And so I just appreciate his stance because he tries to understand all sides of topics. And so he's one of my first. Another one who just moved out of a role many of us watched was former CDC director, Dr. Tom Frieden. He's out of that particular spot now. He's moved kind of back into public practice and into the public eye. And he still, as you would expect, has an opinion on everything going on, not just in the United States, but around the globe. So he's an interesting fellow to follow just from perspective. And then someone in kind of my own world, Ryan McNamara. Dr. McNamara is an HIV research scientist. He's a Tar Heel, so he's celebrating today. He is. Up to UNC. But he's a virologist, and he's also just a general microbiologist. And I found his post and his commentary to be very, very engaging and very accurate. So those are just kind of three that I'd keep an eye on.
Very good, and I appreciate you sharing those with our audience. I can't think of a better way to close down our segment than to talk about a topic near and dear to your heart. The Medical Laboratory Professionals Week is coming up towards the end of April, #Lab4Life. What else can you tell us about the big week, Dr. Rohde?
Well, we're getting geared up, both at the national level and the state level, National Medical Laboratory Professionals Week. And as you know, we talked about earlier when I was on your show, we believe that medical laboratory professionals really are people who save lives in the shadows of healthcare. And I often like to remind people that maybe first-time listeners are coming back to your show to listen in that these individuals are very much the healthcare ground crew. And I like to use the analogy of the airline industry. So most people see their doctor, their nurse, and people like that, and maybe their physical therapist. And I like to kind of align that with what you might see at the airport, your pilot, the flight attendant, someone helping you in customer service. But you're not seeing the baggage handlers or the mechanics and people like that are kind of behind the scenes. But I almost always would bet my paycheck that most people want a well-qualified mechanic working on that airplane, even though you rarely see them. So just you want to be able to trust that they are the best educated, they have the credentials behind their names, and they know what's going on. And we want people to know that that's who we are. We're behind the scenes. We truly are saving lives every day. And I I have the utmost respect for my colleagues and alumni that are out there doing this day in and day out. And not that they need a lot of rah-rah, but it sure is nice when people understand that there are people all over the healthcare spectrum helping them.
The offensive lineman of the healthcare world.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. Without those hogs up front, nothing's happening.
All right. Well, Dr. Rohde, as always, of course, we appreciate you stopping by. And I know I speak on behalf of a lot of folks. We appreciate the important work everyone in the medical lab science profession performs on our behalf each day.
Thank you, sir, for the time.
48 state health agencies reported experiencing budget cuts since 2008. And last count, there are 50 states, 49 if we don't want to include Illinois.
Right, exactly.
I say that. Most of you know Tony's from Illinois. Tony, I'm kidding. Don't tell any of your friends back in Chicago that I said that.
There you go.
You're a few months younger than me, Tony. Maybe health isn't a primary concern. However, I know in your day job, you speak with a number of people who work in and around the medical and healthcare world, supplies, equipment, services, practitioners. You work with a lot of people, your day job. You're on the phone talking with people who work in the industry. There are a lot of people out there who are selling services and solutions to different governments, public sector, military.
Oh, yeah. And just the amount of bids that are coming out there and all these other industries that are popping up. I mean, you look at the medical cannabis industry, that's going crazy. So, big pharma and medical, they're all booming right now, especially for government bidding.
Thanks again to Dr. Rohde. A reminder, and do make note of this, you can follow Dr. Rohde on Twitter at Rodney Rohde, Rodney, R-O-H-D-E. In addition, the must-follow contacts Dr. Rohde shared will be in the description of the podcast. No crazy bids this episode, but I sense it's working. We're building up the anticipation for what's to come. Put it this way. If there is one person, one human being on the planet qualified to present crazy bids, it's the guy, what am I saying? It's the savant who joins us starting with the next episode. Somewhat a myth, definitely a legend. He'll have crazy bids that you can win, and you've all seen the t-shirts and bumper stickers with that tagline. A reminder, Lab Week is April 23rd through the 29th. If you want a qualified mechanic working on your 737, or you don't want your quarterback sacked every 3 pass attempts, remember, you want talented, experienced people as part of your medical laboratories. Well, at least I do, and Tony, I know you agree with me there. Spread the word, good people. Thanks for downloading, sharing, and following the Big Bid Theory. Tony, it's time to say goodbye to our smart, talented, witty, extremely good-looking audience.
Thank you for joining us. We all love you. And get ready for Jim coming from the van down by the river.
Now you got me intrigued. You can email me at bculhane@bidprime.com. Tony is tcallis@bidprime.com. Our Twitter handle is @TheBigBidTheory. Thanks for following us. Thanks for liking and retweeting the stuff that Lauren and the team put out there. My Twitter is _, that little underline dealy thingy, Hunter. You'll find Tony @Anthony Callis. That's Kallas. Don't forget we're Facebookers as well. I all the time I'm trying to get Tony off Facebook. Well, this season, Lauren and the crew, they're going to be doing more on Facebook. Please give us a Facebook like. Until the next show, for Tony and our staff prepping for the arrival of the curator of crazy bids, shout outs to the MedLab pros out there. Until next time, friends, go Gunners, Barracudas, Tigers, Bobcats, and Cubs. And we wish you all the best in growing your business.
We're having so much fun,